Hi friends, let's read Scooby-Doo and the Weird Waterpark. Scooby-Doo and the rest of the Mystery Inc. gang were on their way across the desert in the Mystery Machine. It was a hot day, and everyone was really thirsty. They were all glad when they spied a small town in the distance. Hooray! They cheered when they spotted a roadside refreshment stand. Like, I could really go for a cold soda, Shaggy cried. Ree-roo, Scooby-Doo agreed. He nodded and stuck out his tongue. Blah. As Fred pulled the Mystery Machine off the highway, the gang noticed some sad-looking kids sitting by the stand. It looked like the owner was mad at them. You kids are driving me crazy. You're always underfoot, Mr. Reed, the stand owner, growled at the kids. Find some other place to go. Like, why don't you kids beat the heat at that groovy water park over there? Fred asked. One boy looked up sadly and said, We can't. That was my dad's place, and he had to shut it down. The three kids were named Matt, Amanda, and Ronnie. They told Shaggy and the others that Matt's dad had to sell the park, even though it had been the family business for years. But why? Asked Daphne. You'd think it would be a very popular spot in a hot place like this. It's closed because it's haunted, Amanda said in a quiet voice. Haunted by spooky water monsters. Haunted? Shaggy said with a gulp. Rookie water monsters? Scooby whimpered. That's right, water monsters, Mr. Reed grumbled. They're evil spirits that sometimes possess watery places. The water monsters are half man and half fish, Ronnie told the gang, his eyes wide. They're white like ghosts, and they have sharp teeth. Ghosts are bad for business, Mr. Reed complained. Don't worry, everyone. We'll get to the bottom of this, Fred said, leading the gang into the park. If there's one thing I love, it's a good mystery. ZOINKS! Like, if there's one thing I don't love, it's ghosts, Shaggy cried. Me neither, Scooby agreed. Suddenly, Scooby's nose sniffed wildly, and his tail stuck straight up into the air like an antenna. Poing! Shaggy was sniffing too. Like, somebody's having a barbecue inside the water park, he said excitedly. Rah, rah, barbecue, Scooby exclaimed. You guys can look for the barbecue that way, Fred told them. The girls and I will explore over here. Scooby and Shaggy knew they were getting close to the delicious-smelling barbecue, but they couldn't find it. They checked everywhere. Shaggy yanked open a door, then turned as white as a ghost. Without warning, a scary water creature jumped out at them. Grrr! It growled as it reached for them. Zoinks! Let's get out of here, Scoob! Shaggy shouted. Like, I think I just lost my appetite for barbecue, especially if we're on the menu. Shaggy and Scooby raced into a nearby tunnel. It was the water control center for the park, and it came to a dead end. Grrr! The creature was gaining on them. Like, no way to go but up, Scoob, Shaggy said. Come on! Shaggy climbed up the ladder in a flash, but Scooby wasn't getting anywhere. He was climbing the spokes of a valve wheel, not the ladder. The wheel turned around and around. Roar! Scooby-Doo wailed. Meanwhile, Fred, Daphne, and Velma were checking out the park from above. Let's see if we can spot those evil monsters, Fred said. Wait, I think I hear something rumbling, Daphne told them. And it's coming this way. Suddenly, a huge surge of water came rushing down the slide. Whoosh! The water caught the kids and carried them away at full speed. Oh no! Scooby-Doo had accidentally turned on all the park's water rides. Soon, the gang found themselves being swept down a twisting tube. Jinkies! I like water parks as much as anyone, Velma shouted. But I wish I'd had time to put on my bathing suit first. Down, down, down they sped, through the slide, around crazy turns and dizzying spirals. Actually, it was kind of fun. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the ride ended. The kids found themselves washed into a beautiful lagoon. Splash! Daphne was not happy. "Just look at my hair," she complained. "Never mind your hair. Where are my glasses?" Velma asked. "Oh, here they are." As Velma slid on her specs, she spotted the gang's first clue. There was a strange-looking truck parked next to the lagoon. "Jeepers," said Daphne. "What's all that equipment in the back of that van? It looks like it's for scientific testing." Fred nodded. "It is. I've seen that kind of equipment before. It's for locating and testing underground water." But before they could investigate further, the kids got an unpleasant surprise. A creature from the deep jumped out from behind the truck, growled, and lunged right at them. At the same time, Shaggy and Scooby were tiptoeing quietly through a dark corridor under the park. "It looks like we lost that growling ghoulie, Scoob," Shaggy whispered. "Like, I think we're safe." "Oh boy," Scooby said happily. But they quickly changed their minds. A giant octopus with big, ugly eyes and sharp, pointy teeth appeared in front of them. It grabbed at them with a long, slimy tentacle. Shaggy and Scooby fled in the other direction, into a strange round room. They clanged the door shut behind them. Right away, the guys knew they were in trouble. Water was spraying from the walls, filling the entire chamber. Before long, Shag and Scoob had to dog paddle to keep their heads above water. Then suddenly, the water was propelling them upward. They looked up, and there was no ceiling, just a long tunnel going up and up. The two friends hugged each other and gulped. Scooby and Shaggy shot out of the top of the park's volcano. It was like being fired from a water cannon. They were so high up, they could see everything. "ZOINKS! Look, Scoob, there's another monster chasing the rest of the gang," Shaggy shouted. But they didn't have time to worry about the others now, for as fast as they'd gone up, they were now coming down. Luckily, Shaggy and Scooby landed in the volcano's river. It carried them over churning waterfalls down to the lagoon at the bottom. They forgot to be scared. They were having too much fun. "Like cowabunga, river doggy," Shaggy shouted happily. "Ride those rapids, Scoob." "Ree-hee-hee," Scooby laughed. Shaggy and Scooby finally came to a gentle stop in the lagoon. "Man, that was one wild ride," Shaggy said. "Rah, wild," Scooby-Doo nodded. "We better go find the others," Shaggy suddenly remembered. "They look like they could use some help." The two friends didn't realize it, but at that very moment, they needed help too. Close by, Fred, Daphne, and Velma were hiding from the water monsters. Now there were two creatures from the deep chasing after them. "Those creatures sure are protective of that truck," Velma said. "It must be a very important clue." Fred noticed an office door. "Let's hide in here and see if we can figure out this mystery," he said. Fred said. "This place doesn't look deserted. In fact, it looks like someone works here every day." "I found another clue," Velma said, holding up some blueprints. "I'm beginning to get an idea about what's going on here." Before Velma could explain, there was a loud banging on the door. The kids jumped. "Uh-oh, I think those creatures have found us," Daphne cried. But it wasn't the water monsters pounding on the door. It was Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. They were in big trouble. The giant octopus had found them again, and it was trying to wrap them up in its slimy tentacles. "Like, let us in," Shaggy shouted. "Help!" Scooby cried. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo slammed the door before the enormous octopus could reach inside. "This is no good," Velma said. "That's the only door, in or out. We've got to go find more clues if we're going to solve this mystery." "Like, not me," Shaggy whimpered. "I'm staying right here, where it's octopus free." "I know what we can do," Fred said. He pointed to a vent in the wall. "This vent is big enough for us to crawl through. Let's go." They all began crawling into the vent, but before Velma climbed in, she spotted another clue. It was a battery charger. Once the gang had crawled to safety, Fred had an idea. "Shaggy and Scooby, you take this hose," he said. "Try to attract the creature's attention. When you signal, we'll turn on the water full blast. Hose the monsters into that net and we'll wrap them up." "Ruh-uh," Scooby shook his head from side to side. "Like, no way, Fred," Shaggy said. "We're not going anywhere near those fishy freaks." "Would you do it for a handful of Scooby snacks?" Velma said, holding the treats in the air. "They're nacho flavored." Shag and Scoob couldn't resist Scooby snacks, especially nacho ones. Soon they were munching happily as they headed off to hunt for the water monsters. They hadn't gone far when they made a lucky discovery. It was the barbecue they had smelled earlier. "Like, my compliments to the chef, whoever he is," Shaggy said between bites. Scooby smiled, nodded, and kept chewing. Munch. Chomp. They were so busy eating, they didn't notice the 3 watery creatures had suddenly joined them. "Turn on the hose! The hose!" Shaggy yelled as they backed away from the angry creatures. "Rose! Rose!" Scooby joined in. But the hose filled with pressure too quickly, and Shaggy and Scooby were lifted off the ground and into the air. "Too much pressure! Too much!" Shaggy yelled. "Roo-rutch! Roo-rutch!" Scooby cried. Shaggy and Scooby hung on to the wild hose with all their might. It shot back and forth through the air like a bucking bronco. Fred, Daphne, and Velma tried to turn down the water pressure, but the valve wouldn't budge. "I've got bad news, girls," Fred said. "The valve is stuck." But before the monsters could get to the others, Scooby and Shaggy came down again. As they fell, the hose wrapped around the monsters, knotting them up so they couldn't get loose. Shaggy and Scooby had saved the day. "You couldn't have done better if you were cowboys in a rodeo," Fred said with a grin as he finally managed to turn off the hose. All the kids laughed. But then the snarling, slimy octopus returned. "Oh no!" Scooby yelled. He jumped into Shaggy's arms. Everyone was terrified. Everyone but Velma. She calmly walked over to one of the captives and took something away from it. It was a remote control. She twisted a knob, and the giant octopus disappeared. "Like, I don't get it," said Shaggy. "What happened to the big ugly puss?" "It was just a hologram," Velma explained. She pointed to a projector up on the water park mountain. "And these creatures are just the soda stand owner, Mr. Reed, and a couple of his cronies," Fred said. "According to the blueprints in the office, there's a big supply of underground water beneath the park," Velma continued. "These crooks wanted to develop this land and build a city where they could control all the water." "That's why they scared everyone away," Daphne said. "We would have gotten away with it, too, if it weren't for you meddling kids and your dog," muttered Mr. Reed. It wasn't long before the water park reopened for the town to enjoy. Matt, Amanda, and Ronnie invited Scooby and the gang back for a big party. They had fun in the sun all day long, splashing in the cool water and sliding down the slides. "Thanks for saving our park," Matt's dad said to the gang. "As far as I'm concerned, you've all got free lifetime memberships here." "Rooby-dooby-doo," cheered Scooby. "Phew! Thanks for reading Scooby-Doo and the Weird Waterpark with us.